Hello, everybody. And as mentioned, my name is Eva Helps, and I am a Civil Infrastructure Technical Specialist at ATG. A little bit about me and my experience in the civil industry. I was an engineer assistant in the Marine Corps, where I got to do a lot of field experience, including a lot of design on the fly in the field. And then I've worked at various civil engineering and surveying firms throughout the US, from Colorado to Virginia, and eventually back here to the Midwest to Iowa, which is where I'm originally from and currently living as well. Throughout that experience, I got the opportunity to work on a lot of different types of civil infrastructure projects, including subdivisions, roadwork, utility design, DOT jobs, just a lot of different experience in the civil industry. And as you can imagine, that allowed me to experience a lot of different civil design challenges as well. Along with that industry experience, I have my AutoCAD and Civil 3D professional certifications. I'm an Autodesk certified instructor. So all that together, I get to help continue to resolve design solutions, discover more efficient workflows for the civil industry, which of course includes Civil 3D, and share that with people like you. Today's session with me is nerding out with Project Explorer, because who doesn't love organized design data? Today, we're going to get to know Project Explorer by taking a look at what object data is inside of Project Explorer, how to manage, manipulate, and view all the different object data and design data inside of there, ways to export that data directly from Project Explorer and share it using various output options. And the goal of everything we learn here in Project Explorer today is to help you streamline your workflow and make your design process more effective inside this Civil 3D world. Because as I'm sure you've experienced, there is an ever-growing amount of data between the object and the design data and the existing data, and trying to get that all organized can be a challenge. So hopefully what we learned today helps you utilize that Project Explorer to do just that, organize some of your data. That's what it was created for. It's Civil 3D's one-stop shop for tons of Civil 3D objects and all their data. As someone who has been around since Land Desktop, I understand that people might be hesitant to try to change their workflow or use a new tool to help them with their design. But Project Explorer is more of an addition to your workflow. So it's not only going to help organize data, it's in a way that you are familiar with and just makes it easier to see all in one place. If you've used or are using Civil 3D, I'm sure you've experienced having to jump into multiple dialog boxes to edit certain aspects of your design elements and your object data. For example, if we were going to take a look at, let's say, a pipe inside of your Civil 3D drawing. So I can select this pipe here. You can either hover over that pipe and it gives you some of that data. You can come over here to your Tool Space Prospector tab and you can see even more information about that pipe. You can right-click on that pipe, the pipes in here to zoom to them. You can look down here to see those different pipes and some of their design data inside of here. You can also right-click on one of those and say you wanted to edit the pipe properties. That pulls up another dialog box where you can flip into these different tabs where you can see some more of that design data. Or once you have that pipe selected, you can also come up to this blue outline contextual ribbon here and see some more options inside of here, including editing the entire pipe network, which you can do. And again, pop out another menu here in the geometry editor and again, see some of this editable data or just the data to be able to view for that pipe network. Jumping into all these different dialog boxes, all these different menus, this is common not just for pipes, but for pretty much all the Civil 3D objects and design data inside of here. It can be difficult to feel like your design data is organized by jumping into all these different menus and kind of challenging to connect that data in an overall view of the design project. So this is one of the reasons Project Explorer was created, to have all of your object data in one central location. So when you talk about Project Explorer, if I hop up to the ribbon here on the Home tab and this Project Explorer, if I select it, it brings up the Project Explorer. So rather than popping into all those different menus, you can have this up, and granted, you would likely want to utilize two different screens or monitors to be able to have this up and be able to utilize it. And then you can move around inside of model space, selecting things, and even going into different commands So unlike when you're utilizing some of the other commands, I'm going to drag this to the side here a little bit, and you are, selecting these things and you're bringing up these menus. So once this dialog box is up, you can't do anything outside of it, right? You have to apply your changes or cancel out of there before you can manipulate or pan around inside of the model space. One cool thing about the Project Explorer, it's modeless, so that means it can be up all the time. You can drag this over to your second monitor, have it up to reference, all the while you are able to move around inside of your model space, even edit or manipulate whatever you want inside of your Civil 3D drawing, and still have this up to reference. So that's one advantage of the Project Explorer. You can have all your data right there in front of you, at the same time be working inside of your drawing. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this tool space a little bit to have a little more space on my screen here, since I am just utilizing one screen. Again, if you were utilizing this on a regular basis, you would likely want to have it on another screen. You can make it full size and just have all that data inside of there. So I will be jumping back and forth from having this full screen to making it a little smaller so that we can see how it affects that model space data if it's not reflected up here at the top. I will mention I'm using Civil 3D 2024. That way we can make sure that we're in conjunction with all the WizDot tools so that you still have availability for those when you need them. And in 2024, it is located, as I mentioned, on the Home tab on the Explorer panel there on the ribbon. You can also, if you have any objects selected inside of here, you can right click and open Project Explorer to view that data inside of there as well. And it jumps right to that tab and to that data that you have selected. But before we get there, we'll talk a little bit about the user interface of the Project Explorer here and kind of define how to use it and what all these different tabs and view panes are. If you have a previous version of Civil 3D and you want to install that Civil 3D Project Explorer, you can come to your manage.autodesk.com and install a previous version from there as well. 24 and 25, it automatically installs unless you do some kind of custom install, but otherwise you can head here and install it from your Autodesk account page. Okay, so taking a look at the Project Explorer, we're going to talk a little bit about the user interface here and kind of get more information about that as we go along. At the top of the Project Explorer here, you see we have these different object tabs. These are the categories, all the different objects that we have inside of the drawing, from alignments, assemblies, subassemblies, corridors, points, surfaces, etc. We'll talk about the majority of these today. Right below those tabs, you see you have this view pane, which kind of acts like model space. You can pan around, zoom in and zoom out with your mouse wheel, just like you can inside of model space. Below that, we have our objects. So in this particular tab, we're on alignments, which just a note here, that number next to the little icon there of the alignment shows you how many alignments you have inside of this particular drawing. And down here, it lists those alignments. And just like in the tool space prospector, the alignments and profiles are kind of in conjunction with one another. So you have the alignment and directly below that, the profile that is associated with that alignment. Below the objects, you have these sub-objects. So inside of an alignment, you have the calculated stations. You can see the stationing there. You have the alignment entity, so your curves and your lines. You have all the PIs and super elevations if those were included here, and any property sets that were applicable to those alignments would be included in here as well. So all of these objects and sub-objects will be different for each tab, as you can imagine. So if we hopped over to the Assemblies tab here, you can see the objects now have the assembly name and some information associated with those. And now the sub-objects have the sub-assemblies, associated corridor regions, and again, any property sets that might be attached to those. So each object category here is going to provide different information about those specific objects. It's a user preference. You can come up to the upper right-hand corner here and you can change the layout, a couple different views. So you could do a side-by-side with the objects and the sub-objects here, or you could have it totally remove those sub-objects if you just wanted to focus on the alignments. Maybe you have a lot like inside of this drawing and you wanted those all visible. Play around with that once you're, depending on what you're working on and what you're wanting to view and manipulate. Those different views can change the layout of that. Speaking of preferences and layouts, if you look at the bottom here, we have a couple tabs, a preferences tab. This will allow you to change what is visible on here, so you can change which overall object tabs, which categories. So if you didn't want to do anything with points groups or catchments or sample line groups, you could turn all those off. You select OK, and you can see that those tabs are now no longer visible up here on the top. I'm going to go ahead and pop in and turn them back on. A couple other things you can change inside of here, just the look. Just like you have inside of the options in Civil 3D, you can kind of change the look and feel if you're in Project Explorer a lot, figure out what works for you. And if you ever change something and you decide that's not for you, you can always come down here and restore the defaults as well. The Layout tab down here, so you could go in and check or uncheck and change what exactly that is showing inside of this object pane here. So if you didn't want the object style, type, site, start station, etc., you can toggle these on and off and change what's shown in here. So if I unchecked a couple of those, hit OK, now you can see that those are no longer represented here in these columns on the object pane. So inside of the layout, again, it's going to be different for each object that you choose. So you can customize what exactly you want to view for the particular object depending on what you're doing with that design. Again, you can always restore to defaults down here. And you can also save this out. So if you are always working on corridors and you wanted to only see specific things about those corridors, you can save that out. So next time you come in here, you can open one of those file types, and then that layout will automatically populate to those settings that you had previously saved. A couple more general callouts here about how the Project Explorer functions. You can see that this text here is magenta. So anything that's magenta inside of the Project Explorer is editable. So you can modify that. You could change the name right inside of there. You can change the object style. You can also right-clicking, just like inside of Civil 3D. Right-clicking has a lot of different options. So if you wanted to do any, depending again on what you have selected here. So if I select this alignment, so if you right-click, you can do quick report to file, quick report to an AutoCAD table inside either the model space or paper space, or you could export it to a 2D AutoCAD DWG file. So if you were working with somebody who didn't have Civil 3D, you could export that out to a 2D AutoCAD drawing as well. You can also right-click and zoom to the object that you have selected. So if I select zoom to, it will zoom to that inside a model space there. I have this alignment selected, so you can see it zoom to that alignment. I can move this out of the way to see a little better. But again, if you right-click, you can zoom, pan to both the alignment and or that profile as well. So it's a handy tool like inside of Civil 3D. Right-clicking can give you those options that's specific to whatever is highlighted there at that point in time. And we'll talk more about the functionality of the different text colors and right-click menus and things like that as we go along here, specific to each object category as well. Continuing on to talking about how you can use this functionally with your design. Some other options inside of here, if you have an alignment selected here and you right click, you can set an alignment style. Well, how is that different than just going in and selecting it inside model space here? Let's say you had multiple design alignments and you wanted to change the styles of all those. You can actually come in here and either hit shift, or if you wanted to skip one, hit control. And then you still have that same functionality. If you right click, you can set the alignment style. So say you had a new alignment style that you wanted to change those to, you could change all of them at once rather than going in and finding each individual alignment inside model space and changing them individually. So that is handy. We mentioned that magenta text calls out text that you can edit. There's also text that could be, let me see if I can find some. So you see the red text here. That's an indication that you need to take a deeper look at that. Something might be wrong with the design criteria or some other reason that you might need to take a look at that particular object or sub-object or whatever's highlighted red. And as you hover over it, you can see that it tells you what's going on there and what you need to check out. While we're inside the Assemblies tab here, we will take a look at what all you can do here. So you can, again, using that Shift key on your keyboard, you could select multiple assemblies at once. You can use that right-click functionality and set everything from the description, assembly styles, code set styles, or assembly types for more than one assembly at a time. If you take a look down in the sub-assemblies area here, you see you can also change the values of all these sub-assemblies. You could change the width and see that graphically represented in the, there we go, double click inside of there. I'm just going to exaggerate it so we can kind of see the difference in the view pane up at the top. So you can change the width of that, you could change the slope, and rather than panning around in model space, wondering, hey, wait, did I do this one yet? Did I do this one yet? If you wanted to change something across the board, you can just select through here, having them all in one area, just a little more organized and easier to keep track of and see what you've changed inside of here. Go ahead and change that back. So you can change those values inside of the sub-object pane here for those sub-assemblies, but if we come over to the sub-assembly tab, so you can change those values inside of the sub-assembly category as well, maybe even a bit easier as these are all categorized. So if you knew you needed to change the lane, super, elevation, AOR sub-assembly, you can select all of those at once and then come down here and change the information of all of those at once. So now if I select those, you can see I changed that base depth to 1/2 foot, and it changed for all of the ones that I had selected up here. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. We had mentioned the quick reports. Maybe this would be an opportunity to show, say if you didn't want to flip through all these and take a look down here to make sure those values were what they needed and you wanted to compare them to one another, you could come up to this first subassembly, scroll down, hit your Shift key to select all those, and here you can right click and go to that quick report to file. So if we do that, it's asking you what sub-object type you want to do. You can do any of these tabs down here. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the subassembly parameters, hit next. This brings up your create quick report. So from here you can edit the report style, come in here and change the size or orientation. If you were creating a table, you could change the way that looks here, fonts, and so on. And you can also save this out just like you can with the layouts. And that way, if you wanted to create consistent reports throughout, you could open up that report style and bring that in here when you are wanting to print those reports. I'm just going to leave everything as the default and select OK. I'm going to leave everything here as the default as well. For the file type, you can do a number of file types. I like the Excel file type because there's a lot of columns and it can get kind of messy if you print straight to PDF. Sometimes those columns can get squished together and the data is a little hard to read. So with an Excel file, you can go ahead and I'm going to print that quick report here. I'm just going to save it inside of here and it should automatically pop up that extended report. Kind of confusing. The first page here just gives you the information on how and when and where that was created from. But if you go ahead and select these tabs here, it gives all that information. And again, you can, depending on what columns you have set up, it gives you all that information in an Excel sheet. And if you wanted to print it out to a PDF, you could do that from here as well. But now you can select through these different tabs here and kind of see the information in an even more familiar space of Excel. So just an option for quick report. Go ahead and close this out. And depending on how you wanted that information seen as well, you can also manipulate these columns just from here by dragging and dropping, something I didn't mention originally, but you can set the layout to view that way as well, customizing how those columns are shown and where they're shown in order there. You can do the same thing down here if you so choose. And as you're working through all these different categories, these objects and sub-objects, you might come across something such as this, just like inside of Civil 3D, a little triangle Yellow triangle with an exclamation point indicates that something might need your attention. I hover over this and it shows me that corridor definition is out of date. Well, rather than going anywhere else, I can just come over to this corridors tab, select that corridor that needs updated, right click, and you'll see some of the right click functionality for the corridor, including the rebuild corridors here. So I can just go ahead and select rebuild corridor, and now we're all up to date there. Taking a look again at some more of the right click functionality. If you right click on one of these corridors, again, you have these different options. You can set description, corridor styles, code sets. You can set the automatic rebuild inside of here. Just some other functionality instead of hopping into other dialog boxes from a different window. They're all kind of inside of this Project Explorer, and you can go to any of them from inside of here. Let's go ahead and switch over to the point groups tab here. So you can see, again, you have 3 panes here. We don't have a visual as far as the view pane up here goes, but you have a list of all the point groups. Then inside of those point groups, you have the list of the points. And you can see there's a lot of text that you can edit inside of here, including everything that's highlighted in that magenta color. And again, if you had property sets, you would see those down here if any of those were tied to any of these point groups or points. Another way to use that output, you could do a report to file from here. And so you can output those COCO points if you needed to into an Excel file and edit those inside of an Excel file, and then maybe bring them into another drawing, or just take a look inside of there and make sure everything was exactly like you needed. Moving over to the surfaces, again, you see this text here in red and this exclamation point. This surface contains no triangles or cells. So it's giving you the error there and giving you the option to go ahead and manipulate that surface how you need to. But you can take a look at these other surfaces. It gives you all of this information. And again, if we come down to layout down here, say you didn't need all that information, you can always come inside of here and turn some of these on or off in case you want to see only certain things inside of that surface. You can also, everything in here again that's magenta, you can edit. So if you wanted to change, say, a column label instead of surface type, you could change that there and edit it as needed. I'm going to move right along to feature lines. I think editing feature lines inside of Project Explorer is one of the handiest tools. This drawing might not be the best example of that, but say you had a parking lot with islands or back a curve of feature line drawn out. Just going to zoom to one of these by right clicking and zooming, and then right clicking and selecting. You can see this is the feature line here. So if you wanted to edit that feature line, there's a lot of different options inside of Project Explorer where you can edit it directly here. You can see the reflection in this profile view up here of how that feature line is. So if you select down in the sub object categories here, select all those, right click, you have a bunch of different options inside of here, including set a constant elevation to the feature line points. You can set a constant grade between holding the start, constant grade between holding the end elevation, or a constant grade between holding the start and end. So let's go ahead and do that just to see the changes inside of there. So I'm going to select set a constant grade between the feature line holding the start and end. So you can see it goes ahead and sets that constant grade. If you wanted to set a constant grade holding the start elevation, you right click, select that option, and you can hop in here and edit the grade. So if we wanted to hold the start, you can either choose by rise over run or a slope grade. I'm just going to go ahead and select this to, maybe we're changing that to 5. Select OK, and you can see how that applied down here. So if you had a bunch of feature lines inside of here you were using for grading and you needed to do some edits, I think it's a really convenient way to do that and see that reflection right inside of here and change those holding the feature line elevations that you need. So like we talked about earlier, yes, you can, as you see this highlighted, you can see that there are the option in the blue contextual ribbon up here to do these kind of similar modifications. But if you're working in your whole picture design here and you have the Project Explorer up, you can do those directly inside of here, and say you needed to pop over and it reflected some changes in the corridor, you could bounce over and check that inside of here, or maybe you're doing some lot grading, and inside of the parcels you wanted to see how that affected those, or maybe the area or something like that, you could do that all inside of Project Explorer. Speaking of parcels, we're going to hop over to the Parcels category tab here and take a look here. Inside of parcels, another good option to utilize that output functionality. If we wanted to make a table, say, of all of these parcels, we could create an object set and do that. We're going to take a look at the layout. Say you wanted to change maybe the layout of the sub-object categories down here, or even some inside of the parcels up here. The description, maybe you don't want that shown since there aren't any descriptions inside of there. We would hop down to this layout tab as we talked about earlier, already on the parcels tab here. And you can manipulate these columns for not only the object category here, but the sub-objects as well. So you could come down for that parcel segments, which is what we have selected for that tab down there. And you can select the uncheck those all down here, clear all. And just select the ones that you want shown. Once you select OK on that, you'll see it changed the number of columns and the column display and everything inside of there. Same thing with the objects up here. Pop down to layout. Maybe again, I don't want the description shown since we haven't filled that in. Select OK. And now I have that shown. Maybe I also turn off the property set since we don't have anything there. And if you wanted them shown in a different order, we talked about dragging and dropping the columns from inside the Project Explorer, but you could also use these up-down arrow tabs to adjust the organization of that layout here as well. And then it'll be reflected once you select OK. So let's talk about creating an object set for this and making a table from that object set. So this last tab here up in the Object Categories tab is object sets. We actually have one called parcels, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new one so we can walk through how that is done. I'm going to select this new object set. So go ahead and select that. It will give you the option to rename that object set, give it a description, what you want to do with it. For this one, I'm actually going to export to an AutoCAD table in model space. I'm going to use the layout how I have it set up. I just edited that in the layout tab down here for the parcels, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. But if you had a specific layout style you wanted, you could import that here. Again, we save that out as an XMPT file. Browse out and find where you had saved that previously and bring it inside of here. You also have the option to pick an insertion point, so I'm going to go ahead and say I want that table to be placed right here when I'm done with it. Again, if you had a specific standard table style that your company used or you wanted to use, you could choose that in here and browse out and find where that table was located. I'm going to go ahead and use the default table style since I don't have any saved that I want to use, and select OK. So now we have this object set created, but we don't have any objects tied to that. So I'm going to go ahead and have this object set selected and come to the add or remove objects from object set. And I am going to come over to my parcels tab and I'm going to select all of these, turn them on because I want to create a table of every parcel inside of my drawing. Go ahead and select OK. And now you see we have all of those parcels and their parcel segments added to that object set. So if I wanted to create that export to AutoCAD table in model space, so that's the action I have tied to it. And up here you can see these buttons are, you can either create a new object set, delete one, run all actions, or run selected action. So we just want to create this one table. I'm going to go ahead and run selected action. And you can see it created all these tables for each parcel and includes that sub-object category of the parcel segments as well. One thing I forgot to mention, when we did create this object set, right-click on that object set and go to the object set properties. We chose the manual object set type. We could choose dynamic, and then it would automatically modify that table whenever anything inside of that is edited. So let's go ahead and hop over here to the parcels tab. I'm going to come down here. So this parcel name is school MSR. If I wanted to change that, because that text is magenta here in my Project Explorer, I can change that. Put -1 there just to show how that can change and update. So I changed that and you can see how that automatically updated right inside that table. So it's a pretty good dynamic function inside of there as well. Another thing we can see in this table is it provided both the object and the sub-object information for each of those parcels. If we decided we didn't want to choose and see that sub-object information, we could come over to the object set and we see again these magenta text here indicating that we can edit these and manipulate those in some way. So we see we have the sub-object type right here, the parcel segments, and those are the tables that are below each of the parcels. So we have the parcel, and then we have all of the segment information for those parcels. If I decided I didn't want to see that segment information, we can come down here. Let's see, this is the school MSR-1, and I can toggle off use sub-object tables. No, thank you. So if I do that, again, it's dynamic, so it automatically updates, and you can see the segment parcels for those would go away and update the table accordingly. So that gives you an idea on how to export to those AutoCAD tables in model space, some of the ways you can manipulate those and edit those once they're created, and using those within those object sets. We're going to talk about pipe networks next. When talking about inside Project Explorer, pipe networks are another one of my favorite objects to highlight because there is just a lot of the information, the object data, and the design data right here all inside this one screen, and it makes it organized and easier to work with rather than popping into all those different dialog boxes. So here I'm on the pipe networks category tab. You can see my view pane. You can see that pipe network in the profile view. You can see any pipe networks that you do have inside of here. This one just has one named Storm. So if you select that pipe network, you can see all of the different sub-objects include structures, pipes, and the pipe run. I'm going to go ahead and minimize these network property sets since we don't have any of those, and maximize all my different sub-objects since we just have one pipe network that we're working with inside of here, so we can get a little better picture of all of the data inside of here that we can manipulate and take a look at. Again, a reminder, the magenta text is editable, so if you double click in there, you can edit those part names. You can also edit the slope and the inner width of those parts as well. And when you get to take a look at all of your structures in one place like this, you can see problems, or maybe you know that this is a specialty structure and the rim elevation doesn't need to match that, but either way it points that out for you. You can also come in here and change any of these. So if you wanted to change out any of these structures inside of here, you can do that straight from here. If you knew you were going to change all your storm sewer manholes to this dash storm sewer manhole structure style, you could do that inside of here. You could take a look at the pipes. Again, a lot of data can be manipulated and changed inside of here. And your pipe run as well. So similarly, when we were talking about the feature lines, if you can get an idea of your whole pipe run here, take a look at those slopes, make sure you're meeting that design criteria. And if you're not, and there's these violations, here's where you could take a look and either know that those are exceptions inside of this project or edit them if you need to. And while we're talking a lot about all of the ways you can manipulate this data inside of Project Explorer, you can also go to those familiar right-click menus and do a lot of the editing that way as well. So if you wanted to swap that part out, you can have your familiar dialog boxes when you right-click here and do the swap parts, find another part inside of there, or you can right-click and do any of the other options that are available for that particular sub-object as well. And not just the sub-objects, but of course, if you pop up to the pipe network here, you can do the right-click and set the part list, set descriptions, do the label styles, and things like that too. So don't forget your right-click. As you all know in Civil 3D, I'm sure, right-clicking can give you a quick way to see what kind of edits you can apply to those objects. So we had created a table for the parcel information. I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about tables. We're going to create a table from some of this pipe network, from the structures and things inside of this pipe network. So I'm going to go ahead and hop over to my object set tab. And I'm going to go ahead and rename this one just so I know we had created that one. It was parcels, and we had created tables in model space. So I'm just going to name it that. So when I look at it, I can easily reference what exactly that was. I'm going to go ahead and come up here and create a new object set. And this one I'm going to call pipe network tables in model again. I am going to go ahead and choose that export to AutoCAD tables in model space for that object set action. I'm going to make sure it's dynamic because chances are you want that table to update. Maybe if you wanted a snapshot in time, you could do that manual, but for our purpose, we're going to go ahead and choose dynamic. Again, I'm just going to use the layout of the Project Explorer window and leave everything else. I'm going to go ahead and pick my insertion point again down here and select OK. So I've created that object set. Now I need to select those objects and that data to apply to that object set. So I'm going to add objects, come over to my pipe network tab and include that pipe network. I'm going to select OK. And you can see it did create that table. So just some things to note when you are working with the tables. If we wanted to edit the design data here, I'm going to go ahead and change my view here, configuration to two horizontal views here, so we can zoom out to where this structure is. And actually, if I right click here and go to zoom to, it'll take me directly to that structure. I'm going to zoom in so we can kind of see we're on structure one, this top row here. And it will update and dynamically change everything inside of there because I have the Project Explorer open. But if I were to close this out and move this again, you can see that it did not update the northing and the easting for that structure. So it won't update if the Project Explorer is closed, but if I went ahead and opened it back up, you can see that it, I don't know if you saw that change, it's pretty minimal, but it did go ahead and update that table back to the correct northing and easting for that manhole. Speaking of the table, let's say we decided we wanted to change the layout of this table. We can come over without having to recreate that whole object set and table. We could come into this object set that we did create and go to the object set properties. Inside of here, we originally chose the layout of the Project Explorer window, but we could also use that specific layout style. Since I don't have any to browse out to, I can go ahead and just edit that style. I can make whatever changes I wanted to here. So if I drop this down to the structures, which are shown in this sub-object table here, and I wanted to turn off a couple of these columns, select OK. It's going to ask me to save that out somewhere, so I'm just going to save it out here. And now I have this layout change. Select OK, and you can see that it automatically updated that table there. I can also come into those object properties and do the same thing for the specific table style. So if I went into edit style, again, I can choose to edit different things, including the table options, the rows, and I can also save that out. So if I just came in here and selected to change some of these, I don't know, we'll change that to blue and change this to green. Select OK, hit save in that same place, select OK, and you can see it changed the background of those two table cells. If you wanted to change the sub-object type of that table, you can see in this object data that we've added here, you can change the sub-object type here. So if I double click on that structures list, I can run it down to the pipes list, select OK, and that automatically updated. I change it back to the structures list. Since it is dynamic, it's updating that table as it goes along. Another thing to note is if you knew you were going to be wanting to output this object set in various different output options, rather than naming it this, maybe you just rename it to pipe network in general. Select OK. You can also just double click on these object sets to edit those properties. So if I double click here, and let's say I wanted to output this to an HTML file or a doc or PDF or whatever you want to, I'm just going to choose HTML file. Notice it switches from that AutoCAD table output options to the file output options. And just like we did with the table style, if you don't want to use the default report style for the object set, you can select that use specific report style, even if you don't have one created and saved out. Edit that style how you want, and it will save that out like it did before. I'm going to go ahead and keep it as the default report style for objects and select OK. That changed that action for that object set to report to HTML file. So if you run that selected action, it would create that HTML and you could open it if you wanted to. While I know we haven't touched on all of these different objects and the categories here, I hope today gave you an idea of some useful ways you can use this in your current design workflow, and just wanted to get you in front of Project Explorer and realize what it's like having this centralized hub with all of the ever-growing amount of objects and data within Civil 3D that can manage this data, connect it to your current workflows, and help your teams and design work more efficiently, leading to better project outcomes. After reviewing some of these different tabs and the exporting processes and the right-click menus involved, hopefully you have a little bit of a takeaway on how to streamline your current process by simplifying your review, your validation, your reporting, your exporting, and editing of your overall drawing data. And without having to hop into and navigate to where all those different dialog boxes are, you can pop into them right from here if you need to. Looking at the various output options, maybe you found a new way to allow you to quickly share some of this necessary design info, whether it's with the stakeholders or team members or whoever it is, just to ensure that communication and prevent clashes, and looking at that design criteria throughout the project's lifecycle. And thanks for joining me and nerding out with Project Explorer. If you have any questions outside of the Q&A that's going to go on here for a few minutes, feel free to reach out to me. Eva Helps, again with ATG. My information is up here on the screen, so ehelps@atgusa.com. And enjoy the rest of your conference.